Good evening. I'd like to call the Wednesday, August 5th meeting of the Citizens Advisory Committee on Policing Policies to order. I'll start by taking the roll. Deja Vu. Patty Carlisle. Ron Collier.
Here.
Indira Gatlin.
I'm here.
Oh, there she is. Okay. Neil Gould. Neil, I think I saw you. There you are. Okay. Adrian Harden.
Here.
There you are. Okay. Kate Holtzheimer. Joanna Homan. There she is.
Here.
I see she's here. Hi, Joe. Sheila Hubman.
Here.
Yes. Josh Hunt. Is Josh here? Oh, not yet. Okay. Aaliyah Lawson.
Here.
There you are. Thekla Long. All right. Paul Miller.
Present.
Very good. Roger Osgood. No, Roger as of yet. Okay. Crystal Pickus. Sherry. Oh, there you are. I see you. Sherry Sachs.
I'm here.
Very good. Hi, Sherry. Mike Sears. There you are. Okay. Vincent Stokes. I do not see Reverend Stokes. Okay. Priscilla Tate.
Here. Hello, everyone.
Hello. And Sean Weiss. And I see that our Vice Mayor, Michelle Weiss, is with us this evening. Hi, Michelle. Thank you for joining us. Are there any other members of council present or ex officio members here?
Lieutenant McCarter's here.
Is Lieutenant McCarter here?
Yes, right here, Mayor.
Oh, I see you.
He's right there next to me.
Very good. Well, on my screen, he's not, but yes.
There, I'm here as well.
Who is that?
Sorry, Stephanie Scalise. I'm
Oh,
here.
there we are, Stephanie. I see you. Okay.
I am.
Great. Good to see you. All right. All right. Very good. Well, then we will get started. On the agenda, based upon our discussion last week, we were going to contemplate, what we heard and then discuss how we might divide the use of force policy for review and divide into subcommittees to work on different parts of that. We were also going to take a look at the 8-point policy provision regarding racial justice from the letter of the 25 African American councilwomen, of which Council Member Berry is one of the signatories, and discuss what among those 8 we might also want to look at and divide into subcommittees to work on those things. So why don't we start with the use of force, and I'll open it up to the room and see what thoughts are out there for how we might go about this.
Well, okay.
Neil?
Sure. Preface it by saying that this is a classical technical document.
Mm-hmm.
And as such, I would recommend that you first establish a structure for the document. And then once that's been established, you can work on different sections as people were wishing to do. But the idea is not to have someone working on a section that may not wind up in the final document.
Mm-hmm. Sure. And I don't know that we necessarily want or expect the Citizens Committee to draft the policy as much as make recommendations for what should be in the policy. And that, I think, is something that could be more, bullet pointed. It may be that I don't think there's an expectation that the committee would actually write a new policy as much as recommend changes it might like to see.
I agree. Perhaps I wasn't as clear as I could be. For example,
Mhm.
during our first meeting, I asked Lieutenant McCarter what elements of de-escalation are there, and where are they? Is there a policy document regarding de-escalation that would accompany a use of power document or use of weapons? And what he replied to me then is that it's incorporated into this document, is that aspect is part of this document, is part of the use of force document. If that's the case, it's the term de-escalation appears once, and that's not in the document itself. It's in the addendum to the document, and there's no policy structure regarding that aspect in the document. So if that is actually supposedly a part of this use of force document, which I think it should be actually, then it deserves a section of its own and probably ahead of any of the use of force elements. And if we did that, then there are comments that within the document that refer to de-escalation, but again, they're not there. There's no indication of what how they're treated in terms of it being a policy structure. So there'd be a lot of work to do there just to come up with those bullet points for that section.
If I could speak to maybe a way to divide the work a little bit, perhaps Neil would want to lead a subcommittee on what bullet points or what characteristics of de-escalation should be included, or how any piece of the use of force policy about de-escalation could be more, I don't know if it's more specific, more robust, more clear to any lay person reading the document, so that they know, that these are the policies for de-escalation and these are the trainings that the police officers have received, and this is what's expected when they're pulling someone over or whatever it is that's happening, where they have to get involved and interact with the person. I agree that de-escalation was mentioned a lot, but doesn't show up as much maybe in the policy. Another thing I was thinking after last week was weapons. When I first heard about all the different weapons the police have access to, my first thought is, why are they carrying around all these weapons? That seems kind of dangerous. And especially with the recent events with the protesters getting shot with rubber bullets and things like that. But then I heard something on the radio about really the purpose of all those weapons is to have options that are not deadly, to have options that are not deadly, and that really those rubber bullets should not be used during a protest. That's really a mistake. But that's another story. But my point is, maybe another subcommittee works on weapons. Why do the police have these kinds of weapons? What's the training? Where do those fit into the policy? I mean, I just think we need to kind of get some concrete, specific concepts that people want to work on, rather than say this subcommittee is going to look at pages 5 through 10. I'm not sure but maybe dividing it up by page numbers is a better way to do it. I don't know.
My thought was, if I can interject here, was that, the police are the people that have to really implement these policies. But they need to feel there is a need for the people, the citizens, to understand the role of policies. And what I have found in my experiences is sometimes when you're working within an industry and the example I'm going to talk about is the fact that I'm an accountant and I'm also a CPA, and I used to be an auditor. And as an auditor, we would come in with all these auditing terms and And so when we came in, everybody hated you simply because you came in and you started using all this auditor lingo. These policies to me kind of remind me of the auditor lingo. And what happens with that when you have people, and really the purpose of an audit is to help improve an organization, but if the people that are being audited don't really understand that the recommendations are really helping them to be a better organization, then you lose something. And I think that's what's happening with these policies. They look like a police organization wrote all these policies in police. And so when we come to need them and to understand what they're talking about, and they talk policy, we don't totally understand what they're talking about because it's in police jargon. And until I learned a way to help bridge the gap between auditor terminology and helping people be a better organization. And I was in schools at the time. I had to kind of break it down to make it more user friendly. And that's what I envision for this committee. And if there's a topic such as de-escalation, there are sections in this policy that probably needs someone such as Neil, I believe that was Neil who was saying that, to be part of that portion of looking at the policy and making it more user-friendly. More citizen-friendly, so we understand what the services they're really doing for us. And the thought I had was that in section 130, the area from like 1 to 7 could be a committee. Another committee could be, which is basically talking about force. And then another committee would be section 8 to 14 of the 130 policy, because that's dealing with reporting. First, there's the force, and then there's a way to report it back. And reporting it back not only to them, their cells, and to the mayor and to us government people in the courthouse, but to our community so we understand each other. Then I thought another committee could be, I'm thinking of 4 committees, could look at 131, which is the weapons, and really kind of understand just what, I think that was Sears that said that why understand the need for the one weapon over the other, and when's the best time to have these weapons out there. I work in a court, so I understand a lot of this, but the layperson who is the citizen and has to understand and appreciate the police department doesn't understand this policy jargon that we have here. So I'm hoping that we might be able to bridge the gap between the police and the city of University Heights and citizens. And I think that's needed everywhere. And then also they are talking about the Lexipol, and how they're looking at revisions. I think maybe we need to kind of understand why they want to make these revisions. And as we look into it, we make recommendations to help them make it more user-friendly as the city of University Heights. And that's just my thought as I listen to what the different committees have said. We want to make this we want to come up with recommendation and a document that can start the process, move the process forward, but not make it such a big task. Take it in small pieces and then grow from there, and attack different things in a manageable way. And so that's my thought. If anybody has any
Okay, well, Mrs.
thought
Perry,
about that.
in the comments, Crystal made an attempt to summarize what your 4 committees would be. So I'm going to go over that from her distillation and see if this squares with what you're saying, if you think this squares with what you're saying. So there'd be a committee on on General Order 130, sections 1 through 7 on use of force. That would be one committee. Then there'd be a committee that looks over sections 8 through 14 on reporting and oversight. And then there'd be a third committee on on General Order 131, the sections on non-lethal weapons. And then I guess a fourth committee, which is on the Lexipol recommendations, communications, and bridge building with the police.
Yes,
Okay.
that was my thought.
All right.
Any responses, comments, or thoughts to that?
Well, how about Paul? Paul, you got your.
I thought what you say is right on. I just have one comment. Ronald indicated he asked the lieutenant in regards to diversity, in regards to the police force. And if you look at it, it's 7% African American. And it would seem to me, and I've been thinking about that during the course of the week, and I don't see it, and maybe it's not the right place for it, but it would seem to me there should be a written goal in regards to increasing that to a minimum standard of at least 14% or 16%. But there should be something in writing, not just verbally, that when you look at it, and people are going to be held accountable for it. Because I think all of us would like that. I can't speak for all of us. I only can speak for myself. I would like to see that. I know it doesn't belong in this particular conversation we're having, but it should be part of something in regards to the police department, it seems to me. Okay, that's enough.
Yeah. And the question did come up. I know, Sherry, I'll call you in just a moment. But yes, I know the question did come up. Yes, we have 2 African-American police officers. One of them is Dorletha Pitts, who has been with us since 2015. And one is Jermaine Smith, who was just hired last year. Patrol officer was with Cleveland Heights Police Department. He took our examination here at University Heights, got on our hiring list, and then was hired. But I agree, we got to do better. Only 2. It's not representative of the community to only have 2 African-American police officers on our force.
But should it be in writing?
Sorry.
Shouldn't that be in writing?
For a moment, but should that be in writing? That's
Yes.
a question. That should that? I don't know. Lieutenant McCarter, are you aware of any kind of writing within the department striving towards diversity in hiring?
No, I don't believe there's any specific numbers that are in writing. I would think that that would be something that a civil service commission would also have to address as well. Possibly.
I think that may be correct.
I'm
Sheriff,
sorry, I didn't understand you.
Well, we have a civil service commission. Lieutenant, you want to maybe go over that a little bit for the group?
Civil Service Commission establishes hiring procedures and processes as well as promotion within the police department. We are bound by the rules of the Civil Service Commission. And if there's a desire to have specific numbers for the police department, it would have to be probably established through the Civil Service Commission.
Okay, and how do you go about doing that?
Well, you'd probably have to approach the Civil Service Commission and request it through them, through that commission.
And who would do that? The mayor of our city or this group or whom?
I'm sorry, repeat your question.
Sure. Who would actually do that? Would the mayor of the city? Would the law director do that? Would our group do that?
You know, Mr. Miller, I really couldn't answer that question for you. That's something that I don't know.
That's something that we ought to look into the procedure of because,
Yeah, I think we should.
yeah, I know that there are
Thank you, Lieutenant.
other changes to our civil service code that we have discussed as things that we may like to do in addition to this or besides this. And it's that's something that we would want to take up with probably with the law director. Yeah. Okay. I know Sherry Sachs has been waiting, has had a point, so I want to call on her.
Had a couple points, but just to this last one, it sounds like we're talking about use of force right now, and that's hiring practices. So
Yeah.
that might be another group, you know, might be another topic. If you bring in too many things, we're not going to get anything done. I think that that's something to talk about,
Right.
but let's make note of that but do first things first would be what I would suggest, or else we're going to go in 20 different tangents and not accomplish anything. If there's a lot of work to be done, we have to do the work, but we have to do it thoughtfully.
And that is the reason why I was trying to keep us focused on coming up with a document with recommendations for this piece. And then if we go into something else, that would be after this. But you really need to keep it a manageable task, or you'll be all over the place, and it'll just get too overwhelming. But I think that we could focus on this use of force policy and come up with recommendations. The recommendations, really, we recommend them, but to implement them, we have to kind of rely on the police department to do that. And I really believe that University Heights has an open-minded police chief, and the lieutenant that made the presentation, I think they're open to listening. And so in that respect, I think we are lucky as a city, because that's not always the case everywhere. But we can make recommendations and stay focused on this. And then if we want to move into another area, once you can look at some of these 8 points that the councilwoman brought up, and some of them we don't need to do. We can probably support a bigger, the state, if they implemented. Some of them are really things, one of them we already do. So, you know, that can be the next thing that we work on. And I really believe, in my couple of months of getting to know our police department, are open to listening and trying to implement or adjust to the community. I mean, that's my first impression. I've just gotten to know them the last couple of months, but that's my first impression. Am I right, Mayor, or do I have the wrong impression?
Oh, no, I'm not here to tell you whether you're right or wrong. That's not what this is about at all. I like what you said. There is a comment in the comments from an observer, which I'd like to point out because he raises a point, and that is early at our first meeting we talked about, and this is also part of the My Brother's Keeper pledge, about gathering public input. And while you are all members of the public and your input here is public input, there may be additional public input we may want to seek. There may be an effort that we want to make to open up to the community and ask about experiences that members of our community have had with our police department and use of force, or some other kind of public input. And that may be something that we would also want to consider as we break out into committees.
I need something clarified. I'm sorry, Mayor,
Yes, Paul.
I need something clarified to me in regards to Lieutenant. Who decides on this, on force? Who decides what the policeman should use? And when I noticed that you don't have any specific things in regards to during these particular items or occurrences, we will use this. And I just didn't understand that.
Well, it would be very difficult to put in specific situations that the officer's faced in when he's faced with resistance, a very specific tool or intermediate weapon to be used. There are options available, 3 or 4 options that are available to him, as long as the officer is acting in an objectively reasonable manner and using any type of intermediate tools. It's up to him to make the proper decision and discretion on what type of level of force that he needs to use in a certain circumstance.
I think what I'm hearing from Paul is you're searching for procedures. Okay, I'm not saying that's a good or bad thing. I think that you know, there's policies and there's procedures. You're looking for the how to and when to and what to, and that's fine. But if that's what we need to do here as well, those might be like part of the recommendations as well. I'd like to suggest that when you're doing to the lieutenant and the chief and the police and maybe the mayor, that when you're doing the trainings, what could be really effective could be some role-playing examples. You know, what would you do in this scenario? Case studies from maybe not even from our department, but from other places. Even I was trying to educate myself from reading the Supreme Court rulings. I find it so fascinating. Like, I'm hoping that those things are gone over with, you know, reviewed with the police during orientation or their continuing education, whatever you want to call it, because it's just like, not only what would you do, but why would you do it? What about this way? Have you thought about that? And having some real, giving them some real tools, not just here, read this and pass this test, but to Paul's point, like how these policies could be effectively implemented in a way that is safeguarding the public and walking the fine line, you know, and not using excessive force. So, you know, I those are 2 points that I think may be helpful.
Okay, thank you, Sherry. Okay, oh, is that Sean, were you raising, oh, you were just making an adjustment, okay. One of the things that's going on in the chat is a discussion also about needing a stakeholder committee. Perhaps that would be the committee where there would be some public input gathering. It looks like maybe Sean and Vincent and who else put that down? Odesha.
Sometimes public hearings
And Chris.
might not be the best time for stakeholders to have the actual stakeholder committee. I think public meetings are needed, but sometimes you can get off topic real fast and never get to your agenda the way you need to. Maybe there needs to be two separate things.
Very
I
good.
was going to say, I'm thinking, Michelle, based off of what you're saying, I'm thinking the stakeholder committee comes up with how to reach other people in the community, if I'm understanding what we're thinking about with the stakeholder committee. Not necessarily them coming into a meeting like this, but us as a committee coming up with how do we engage them and get their input.
And oftentimes you see that done through either questionnaires or something you mail out and get responses. And the hard part is coming up with the right questions and making it easy to respond to.
I guess you'd have to know exactly what you're trying to measure. And then you could, start at the end and then work with someone to determine the questions being valid and reliable and really getting some input from people and figuring out what to do with that.
And that committee needs to be very intentional on who you place on it, and you don't want it too big also, right? So you need to make sure there's a city representative, a police representative, this committee representative, and who else, whoever else you want on it.
And that probably might be a recommendation that you have in your report that you make to the council in September. To put that together is time consuming. So you don't want to make it such a big task that you don't.
We're not thinking of adding people from outside of this committee to these subcommittees, are we?
No.
No. So this would just be maybe 3 or 4 people trying to come up with ideas of how to get more citizen input.
Exactly.
That was my understanding. Okay.
Yes.
Maybe it should be a different name than stakeholder committee then, because I think that suggests something else. But maybe it's outreach. I saw Crystal put that in the comments.
I'm a little confused, Mayor.
Sure, Paul.
We seem to have 25 people who come from very diverse backgrounds.
Sure.
I mean, I'm not sure why we're looking for other people. I mean, if we can't, in 25 people here, come up with suggestions or recommendations, I'd be hard pressed to think about somebody else coming up with something that's so foreign that we haven't even thought of. That's just me.
Okay.
I don't think we're thinking about adding people. I think we're one of our subcommittees could come up with a questionnaire or something to mail out to, I don't know, a statistical representation of, so that we can get some opinions back. But I don't really think that's something that's a task we want to take on now. I think we really want to just look at these policies and make some recommendations of a direction to go.
Okay.
So, and report to the council in September through a report with some good recommendations on a direction for the city to go.
Okay.
That's just me talking. And with
Sure.
my experiences with schools. So, but that's kind of how we manage projects to get implementation from the public.
Okay. Okay. Any other thoughts on that? All right. So Sandra, Mrs. Berry, you had 4 committee ideas, and then we've also got this outreach committee, and the other things that you've just described probably would go into that outreach committee. Is that what we're thinking?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So it would seem we have 5 subcommittees on the table at the moment for use of force.
Maybe, and that might be too many. You might want to take, you know, those were just a few recommendations.
Sure. Okay. All right. Any other thoughts on that? Mrs. Hubman, it looked like you were about to say something.
Force. 1:30 to 7, 1:30 8 to 4, 1:31 endless goals. I get 5.
Well, the 5th one would be the outreach committee.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah, those are the first 4.
thank you.
Well, well, we seem to have 5 possible subcommittees then fleshed out with respect to use of force. Does this sound good to the group? Should we discuss, you know, who would like to serve on which of these 5 committees?
I
Or do we want
have
to
a
talk about
question.
other
I have a
structural
question.
ideas? Sherry, go ahead.
Is the training going to be part of this, or the education piece? Or is that something else?
What do you mean?
I mean, once, like, there are the policies, but then how are those, are the recommendations, like I've just said a couple things, you know, that I've thought about. How are they then implemented? So you have this wonderful document with these great policies, and it says exactly what you want to say, but how does it get translated, like to your point about the auditing, okay? How does it get translated to the police officers who actually have to use these policies and follow these procedures and use their judgment according to the way that the input of the community, the intent, the, you know, what constitutes reasonable, you know, so we all kind of understand it, and how we can help them be the best they can be, given whatever we want to propose.
The implementation really should be on the police department, the administration, and the council, and the tone always comes from the top. You can make recommendations back and forth, but implementation is really got to come from the tone. Always comes from the top. You know, if the top doesn't decide to embrace it, it's not going to happen. But that's the reason why I say I feel so far that the tone sounds like the top would be open to listening. They're not going to take every recommendation. They will probably take the ones, some of them, and work on them one at a time. But you know, if you watch an organization where they embrace it, it will happen.
So I agree with you. The few times I've reached out to Chief Rogers because I had questions, I was trying to educate myself and kind of talk to him a little bit about some thoughts I had. He was extremely responsive right away. Responsive, follow up, and I just felt very encouraged by that. So I agree with you.
If I didn't feel that way, I would not be wasting my time.
Well, the other thing I wanted to say about last week's meeting, the lieutenant explained that a lot of these classes that the officers take are not mandated by the state, but Chief Rogers wants them to go, more than the state minimum requirement with these training classes. So
Exactly.
maybe there's a way, and maybe this would be a recommendation for whichever subcommittee works on this, just specifically trainings about use of force, of making some of that public so that the citizens know what's happening here in University Heights in terms of use of force, not just policy, but use of force training. That could be a recommendation from the subcommittee.
I know Ron's been wanting to jump in.
I just have a question. Even if if the top says they'll implement some things or not, is there a way we can have like a community neighborhood watch association that works in conjunction with the police department that says, hey, we'll implement certain policies and we'll make sure that you're staying on task?
Perhaps that could be a recommendation.
Mayor,
Yes, Paul.
in other words, at the end in September, we have something in writing, and then the council will determine whether they want to move forward. Is that how the process works?
Well, no, not exactly. That there would be something in writing, and it's recommendations that we would then, well, basically that you would be presenting at council, but making to the police department and to me as safety director, so that Chief Rogers and I and others can and Councilwoman Berry as chair of the safety committee on council can take and under advisement and review and implement all or some or possibly none, but I'm hopeful that there will be some good recommendations here that we would want to incorporate into the policy.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right. So we have five suggested subcommittees then. One on the use of force, one on reporting and oversight, one on non-lethal weapons, one on the Lexipol recommendations / communications / bridge building with the police, and then one which is an outreach committee. Do we think that these five subcommittees then are the appropriate five to use for use of force?
Yeah, I do.
Neil,
Yes.
it sounds like you have something.
I would like to see a de-escalation portion in there, and that would be the area that I would have interest.
Wouldn't
Yeah.
that be part of use of force? Wouldn't it be part of the recommendation?
Right.
As a technique, like I was talking about, you want to see procedures or whatever. So make that as a recommendation. That's in lieu of or in conjunction with or in addition to use of force, I would think.
Well, it's not in addition to, according to Lieutenant MacArthur in the first session, he said that it's incorporated into this document, into this policy structure.
So
And it isn't.
you may want to make additional recommendations about defining de-escalation, when to use it, whatever you have in your thoughts. It sounds like that might be a good committee for you, to implement that. I don't know. Maybe it should be maybe non-lethal weapons. Maybe that's where it belongs.
No, it doesn't belong there.
Okay, I didn't think so. But I thought the use of force, it's an approach to dealing with the situation, to use force, to not use force, to use force with something or in lieu of. That's kind of, I think how I should make.
It's a preface to the use of force, and in terms of policy structure, there would have to be points and procedures listed in the same manner that they're listed for the various uses of force. And since if it's expected to be in there, then it has to be in some kind of a way structured into it. And right now there are comments that imply it, but there's no structure and no policy organization around
Neil,
it.
do the comments that imply it, are they in pages 1 through 7? Do you know? I
There
don't
are
know.
no pages, including the addendum,
They're in the addendum.
including the addendum. They're in all of it.
If we could figure out where de-escalation is mentioned, whatever page that is, maybe you would serve on that committee, that subcommittee, but your focus, you personally, and maybe someone else in the committee could focus on de-escalation recommendations that go beyond what's currently in there.
What it would take, actually, if I understand what you're asking, what it would take is some discussion with if McCarter is going to be part of this process ongoing, or whomever it is. That's the one who would have the information that would be necessary to determine the policy aspect of it. That's not something I could make up as we go along or something. And it's
Well, I think all the subcommittees will probably be reaching out, with questions, I would think, if they want more information as they work through, whatever assignment they have.
Okay. Well, maybe Neil, to your point, item 7 on General Order 130 addresses alternatives to force, and that's not foursquare on de-escalation, but it does go over alternatives, which I think could, for purposes of our discussion, include that. So my sense might be that if we use these 5 subcommittees, that maybe the part where it makes sense to discuss de-escalation would be within the confines of that particular subcommittee. That's just a suggestion. I'm not decreeing that as much as I'm just saying that that seems to be where that might fit. Hitchhiking off of what Mr. Sears said.
Yeah, I don't see it that way, Mayor. I guess, as a technical writer, I look at its structures very differently than that. And I have very few issues with most of this document, to tell you the truth. There are some grammatical errors. There's some structural questions that I have, but by and large, as a policy, it makes a lot of sense. And given the language that is dictated by the Supreme Court's decision, there are limits to what can be done and not done with regard to that, and still make it a viable document. But at any rate, it seems to me that structurally, a predecessor to using force is the process of de-escalation, and if that doesn't work, then you have to use force, and then you go from there to the next step. And I don't know, for example, if there's any kind of reporting required for the attempts to de-escalate. But I know from observing a situation that could have been quite horrible, that there's lots of training regarding it. The training is excellent. So I think that that it's very possible to structure the document in such a way that it includes a policy regarding the de-escalation, but it's not there now.
Do you think that should be its own subcommittee? What do you propose?
Well, I think that it should be a subcommittee, and it could only be possible to do that if at least some of the people in the subcommittee are on the police force, is what I'm saying, because they'll have the answers to questions that aren't available in the document.
To your point, I think last week Lieutenant McCarter, I think he spoke quite a bit about how, or at least made the impression on me about how the officer is trained first to talk to the person, and that in and of itself is de-escalate. I mean, that's
exactly,
that's the first thing.
Exactly.
And to always try to resolve whatever it is by talking to them, or, even if it means resulting in an arrest. So at least that's how it was impressed upon me. Maybe I misunderstood, maybe I didn't. I do want to say, and this is kind of like a disclosure, I did write a grant a few years ago on a very interesting, and it was a validated de-escalation technique that we were applying for grant funding to work with police departments through the organization I work for. However, I just sent an email to the CEO to ask her if we could, talk about that, bring some of those points up, if that would make any sense. So, and there are other models. This seemed to be a pretty good model. So I would be glad to share that if I'm allowed to. But it's something that I think we're in agreement from what I can read in the chat and the things I hear, that we do want to make sure that de-escalation is incorporated. I think the technicality of where and how, and if this fits right squarely with what we're doing here, is the finer point. And to have its own committee, I think that may be a problem, because it's not, you may go through all that work and not get exactly what you want, as opposed to fitting it in somewhere within these documents, such as an alternative to or part of use of force. You see, I don't think you spend all this time on something. You have to talk to the chief, like Councilwoman Barry said. You have to really understand if that's going to be implemented, and if so, maybe the chief has an idea of where that fits, especially if that's the way it's going to be implemented. Just a thought.
Okay. All right. Well, I had a lot of thoughts here, and I know there's some other ground we want to cover. Vice Mayor Weiss helpfully suggested, and I think this is a thing we may want to consider doing. If we put out a Google Doc with the headings of the committees, you can take some time to decide which one or ones you'd like to be on, and then sign up for them on the Google Doc, what your preferences are. One of the things that we can do here, or for next time, would be to have breakout rooms where the subcommittees could meet online at the same time. So it would be tricky to serve on multiple committees, or maybe what we do is kind of a menu where if we have 6, because if a de-escalation is its own, that's an even number, we could put 3 in one column and 3 in a second column, and have a breakout meeting for, that's kind of like the A list of 1, 2, 3, these 3 subcommittees, and then the B list of 1, 2, 3. And then we would be able to facilitate having everybody spending a period of time in one subcommittee and then a second period of time in another subcommittee. Do you know, does that make sense, what I'm trying to convey? For instance, if next week we were to meet at 7, and then say from 7 to 7:30, the Section 131 through 7 committee, the Reporting and Oversight Committee, the Non-Lethal Weapons Subcommittee will all meet for half an hour. And then at 7:30, the Lexipol Recommendations Committee, the Outreach Subcommittee, and the De-escalation Subcommittee will meet for half an hour. So you would sign up for 2, one being one of the first 3, one being one of the second 3.
Well, let's see how people sign up, because you might end up with one person, or and I don't know whether 30 minutes is going to be enough time.
That was just an example. And it probably isn't. If we schedule a 2-hour meeting, we could do it an hour and an hour. And we could arrange them best we can on what people's interests are. And it may be that 2 subcommittees you're interested in would be meeting at the same time, but we will just find a way to work through that. Okay.
All right. That sounds like an excellent that works for me. I don't,
Sure, and thank you. And Mrs. Weiss suggested, Mrs. Berry, that you could perhaps take a hand at evening out some of those if we find that we don't have a lot of good spread there. Maybe the thing to do is to have everybody rank the subcommittees by degree of interest, and then we can assign you, and then that would help. What do people think about that?
That's a good idea.
Okay. All right. And then Mrs. Berry, you and I can look
I
at the
agree.
list and assign you. Would everybody be able to say, by Sunday, be able to, if we put a Google Doc out tomorrow, would you have time between now and Sunday to rank your list?
Yeah.
Yeah, whenever I get lunch breaks from work.
Do we
Okay.
definitely want people on 2 subcommittees just to get more input, you think?
Possibly. Well, what I would suggest is that rank the ones that interest you. If there's one that doesn't interest you at all, well, I don't want to stick you there if you don't have to. But if there's one that interests you in particular, you should rank that number 1. And then we can just sort of see how the groups break down and assign people accordingly. There are, yeah, okay. All right, Sheila?
Can I circle back to something that Mr. Miller said earlier about putting out how many African Americans we want hired? Do you know you can't hire people who don't apply? It's not to put an ad in the paper at Heinen's for a cat, and then you get to see hire. That's not how our city charter is, nor the civil service, and he should know that from the city charter. Am I right, Lieutenant? Is he gone?
No, he's here. Go ahead.
No, we foresee the opportunity that we have to give a civil service examination.
Yeah.
We promote the examination from our department as many resources as we can.
Yeah.
That could be the Cleveland.com, any type of news outlets. We include the Call-in Post, as many as we possibly can to have a large pool of people with opportunities to take the examination.
Yeah, I think you made it feel clear last. And you only can hire people who apply. You just can't hire the next door neighbor. Because the people who test are who you can hire. Am I right? The test first?
Yes.
After, maybe?
I'm sorry, what was your question?
You just can't hire your next door neighbor. You have to hire someone who took the test.
Yes, once a civil service examination is posted, a test is given, ranking for that examination is then established. And we have to hire according to a ranking process.
Yeah,
They said that's because they're busy.
on so many of this, so many of that.
Yes. I think we understand your point, Mrs. Hubman, but yes, we have a hiring list. There's a civil service procedure where we are required to give an examination. We are required then to hire based upon how people performed on that examination. There are a number of factors that go into the scores or on the examination. We certify 3 people at a time for a vacancy based upon the order that they are on the testing list. Then among the next 3 that are up, a hiring decision is made based upon a number of things, background check, interview, and so on. But it's an extensive procedure, and it's not as if each time there's an opening, we just put an ad in the paper. We refer to that hiring list, and then that hiring list is good for a period of time. It can be extended, but then eventually you have to offer a new exam and have a fresh hiring list, and that procedure starts again. Last time we did a hiring list for a patrol officer was I want to say in 2018. I'd have to get the exact date. But that list is still considered a current list, and there are 3 people presently certified on it that we would turn to if we were to hire a police officer.
Right.
Do the police officer, you have to forgive me, I really don't know much about this. Do the police officers have to live in University Heights?
No.
And is there such a thing like in other industries where if there's talented police officers somewhere else, do we recruit? You know, do we see if they want to, if they prefer to work for our community than another? Is that a thing or it's not a thing?
It can be a thing, but they have to take our examination.
They have to take,
Jermaine Smith, who is an African-American police officer here in University Heights, was already a Cleveland Heights police officer, was on the force there. He took our examination. He was an experienced officer that moved over to University Heights.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Okay. So that's a lot of opportunity for people anywhere, really.
Well, if I can answer real quickly your question about residents of the city, you're not required to be a resident of the city. The distance from our city is adjacent counties, so we can pull officers can reside in any one of the adjacent counties to Cuyahoga County, which expands the pool of people.
Yes.
Never.
Oh.
I don't want to belabor the point. Is the only thing I have to say is I have never worked for a company in all my years that I was employed that didn't have goals written for every single person who worked there. Harvard University did a study in regards to those people who came into Harvard who had goals and those people who didn't have goals. The attainment for those people who had goals was up into the 90 percentile. Now, I understand what the lieutenant's saying, that we have to go through that commission. I just reiterate, it's important to put something in writing, if you can.
So like to Paul's point, he has a lot of good ideas and a lot of thoughts about this. Is he able to, or is anybody able to go before this commission and present, you know, is that a thing? Kind of like at the beginning of council meetings? Is it something where, is it open to the public to at least express opinions or questions? I'm just asking.
Well, the Civil Service Commission doesn't have a public forum section. I mean, the meetings themselves are public, but unlike a council meeting, they don't open or have on their agenda a regular public forum section where they would just hear from the public generally. And the thing is most of our citizen commissions aren't set up to do that, because really public input should be directed to your elected officials. It should be directed to me as your mayor. It should be directed to your council members as members of council, because you know we are here to take that input from you and put that input into action. The citizens who serve on these committees are here to serve in a particular role, but not necessarily to, if you will, catch the flack that those of us who have been elected have basically stuck our own necks out to do. So my suggestion would be, if there are recommendations to be made for changing what the civil service rules are, that those be directed to myself and to council as your elected officials to find the appropriate way to enact them. Does that help?
Yes, it sounds like, you know, you could bring these to council. You could maybe even, you know, I think that there's a way, an opportunity, a way to express your specific concerns and ideas and be heard by council to then work it through. Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, I think we're at a point where we've got the 6 potential subcommittees. We can send out the Google Doc. We can send out an email that reminds everyone, hey, the Google Doc, or lets people know the Google Doc is there and you should sign in and rank your 6. Mrs. Berry and I will get together and round out and make assignments. And if that's all right with you, Mrs. Berry. And then we can, perhaps at the next meeting, break out into breakout rooms based upon those subcommittees, and then the magic happens. So how does that sound? And then if we have concluded this portion of our agenda for this evening, we can then turn to a preliminary discussion on the 8-point policy provision regarding racial justice, which was from the councilwoman's letter. We went ahead and typed out what those 8 points were so that you would have them handy there on page 2 of the agenda. These are 8 items that Mrs. Berry signed off on as things that legislatures at all levels should be looking at. And Mrs. Berry, this is more your show here than mine, I think, when it comes to these 8 points. So do you want to talk about them, or how?
Yes, these 8 points went along with the letter from the 25 councilwomen. Actually, more council people have joined on since the letter went out, and we sent it to state representative, federal representatives, and just about all the legislators that we could think of. So in these 8 points, I kind of went through them. We're a small city. And so some of them really, it's a matter of whether you want to support it, but it's not really a University Heights small city initiative. I'm not sure that we can take on just as University Heights and work in a small little area, but there are some things that we can, as a city, decide whether we want to support or not support. But there are, number 8, I think our police department already implements. They already wear body cameras. The ones that I think you might look at is 2, supporting removing discriminative laws such as stop and identify statutes. And that number 4 is implement at a minimum a financial penalty assessment for false calls regarding racial profiling, as well as abusive and unnecessary use of local police agencies resources. 5, I just think we want to really make sure that we conduct additional employment equity training for certified professionals within each respective field, including facial justice, unconscious bias, mental health, de-escalation practices, and drug addiction awareness. I have taken a number of these trainings, and it just opens up my eyes that I have biases, and I think we all do, and we don't realize that we do until you go to one of these trainings and they start asking you, well, what do you think about someone who, is wearing purple or something like that, something weird that you never really thought of that you evaluated, so I believe that might be something. And then requiring an annual accountability analysis of the police department in regards to excessive use of force complaints, and make the reporting complaint process available electronically and anonymous with a follow-up loop. Those are some that I kind of think of that we could look at as a small city. But look at the 8. This was really more going towards a larger range of politicians. And so when the Black councilwomen got together and had our Zoom meeting, we were really talking about experiences that different cities have experienced. And and many of them just brought tears to my eyes, and it took me a minute to emotionally just get over the experiences that some people have had. But as I have talked to our police chief, and I realized that it's nice to live in University Heights, you know, and you've kind of, I can't not be a part of what's happening in our world as a whole, if that makes sense.
Yes. Yes. There's a question that was put in the chat. Did City Council vote on item 1, defining racism as a public health crisis? No, City Council has not taken that up as of this time. I would mention the movement that was afoot in some communities to declare racism a public health crisis arose just as council was going into recess for the summer. So it wasn't something that the last agenda that was in place for the council before it went to summer recess was set before this point really came up. So it is I mean, I think it's a fair question as to whether our city council should consider taking that up. It's something I know that Councilwoman Berry and I talked a little bit about. We didn't try to, we thought that would be something that could, I think it's fair to say, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, Mrs. Berry, but we talked about the possibility of doing that, but also knew that there would be time to do that at some point. We didn't have to race to try to add it to the agenda at the last minute for our last council meeting in June.
And I'm, you know, after we come up with a report on our use of force policies, you know, maybe the committee wants to expand and look at some of these things. You know, whether we as a city want to support some of them or you know, and be part of the larger effort that's moving forward.
So, I'm sorry, Ms. Berry?
Mm-hmm.
Which one of these 8 would you think that we should look at as a committee, in your opinion?
I don't know that I have one that I find more important than the other. I can't, not at this point. I might have to marinate over that one and
Okay.
And let you know next week.
Okay. Sounds good.
I have some basic questions. I really wanted to try to have some definitions. Again, I'm new to this. And I went to the internet. I don't know if that's the best place, but I need help with definitions.
Okay.
Everything from public health crisis, I looked up on Wikipedia, and I need help understanding because everything that's listed here, and again, maybe it's from a biased author, okay, is more like microorganisms. You know, it's not people's attitudes. So I need help understanding, and I really mean this sincerely, what the definition of public health crisis is and how racism or bigotry or anti-Semitism or any of these things fits into that. And so I don't know if that's too big of a conversation here or not, but I need some education there. Okay?
All right, that's fair.
I need some help. The other thing is I tried to look up stop and identify statutes in the United States. It's, again, a pretty lengthy document. But my question is, I'm clear what that is, and it's different in every state. And it, you know, Ohio has, I guess you have to be, whether or not to identify yourself, or if you could take the Fifth Amendment and not, okay, and under what circumstances. My question is, what does, and maybe Councilwoman Berry can answer this, like, what do we envision the officers doing if they can't ask for somebody's name, if they have some reason to stop them? So again, I don't understand how that would work. I need help. I do. So definitions would be very helpful to me to break this down so I can really understand what we're saying. Some of the things are very face value, like body cameras. Okay. Okay, Ron, I see you're. Please help me.
Okay, because I deal with, okay, all right, because mental health is my thing, and I'm a very big advocate of mental health. The effects of slavery, segregation still linger in this country to this day in 2020. Yes, things have changed. I mean, look at me. I mean, I grew up in a suburban area and I went to a private school, but yet some African Americans, like the ones I work with down in Garden Valley, they're somewhat still feeling the effects of poverty and racism. Racism, whether it's intentional, like overt, like, you know, whites only, black colors only, or it's or internal or covert racism, which is hidden, which is something that which my family's experienced. That is a public health crisis because it's still everywhere. I mean, it doesn't matter how middle class or rich you are, it doesn't matter how poor you are. It is still.
I understand that. I mean, I'm Jewish, and anti-Semitism is age old, and I've lost all my relatives in the Holocaust. They were murdered, you know, like I get it. Now it's rearing its ugly head again. So I understand it, but I don't understand how that fits into the definition of public health crisis. That's all. I'm not denying that there's not racism, you know. I
Ms.
just
Sachs,
don't.
Ms. Sachs, it's a public health crisis when two children are born. One is born in the inner city, happens to be black, and one is born in Beechwood, Ohio.
Black.
The life expectancy of the child born in Beechwood, Ohio is 7 to 9 years greater than the person born in Cleveland, Ohio. Now, you may say, well, why? I can give you 20 different reasons why. One of them is somebody has health insurance, somebody doesn't. Somebody eats the right foods, somebody doesn't. That's a health crisis. Right in here, you don't have to go anyplace else. There's a hot health crisis right now in Cleveland. There shouldn't be a disparity of 9 years of living when two people are born at the same day. Just because one is black and one is white. It just shouldn't exist in America. That's a health crisis.
Is that kind of like the Cleveland Clinic is in a zip code where it provides the world-class care, but the people who live in the zip code are not necessarily receiving that?
That's
Exactly.
one of them.
That's why University Hospital built an extension on, I think it's at 55th and Euclid Avenue, so that
I know.
that block of people don't have to think about going to and how they're going to get there. That's a health crisis.
And so that's like this part of the solution.
That's exactly correct.
Okay, thank you.
In
Okay.
Cleveland, it is hard to get to a grocery store that sells produce and healthy foods. You have to go blocks. And if you don't have a car, you can't get there.
Well, thank you for taking the time. It helps me.
Okay.
Good, good.
By the way, if you want to, Ms. Sachs, if you want to know something else, not the health crisis, about stopping, you should read Malcolm Gladwell's latest book. I'm sorry, I don't remember the name of the book. Terrible with names, but it
Like the
gives you.
tipping point guy?
Say that again, please.
The fellow who wrote The Tipping Point?
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
Malcolm
I will. I'll read
Gladwell.
it.
please.
All righty, thank you.
Sorry. Where do we go next?
Okay, one of the, and this is coming up a little bit in the comments, and I want to steer this a little bit. While we will have the deadline in September for the use of force, you know, the discussion we're having here on the 8 points aren't necessarily subject to that September deadline. So, you know, we're talking about some of these things now, I think, so that we can look at as we, you know, prioritize how we go through these things. The use of force recommendations is the first thing we're going to want to complete. But by discussing these 8 items now, we are laying some groundwork for what we would want to do from there. I think that's fair to say. So I just want to make sure that we clarified that this isn't supposed to be in any way a diversion from the use of force portion of what we're working on, but in fact, in addition to that. Mrs. Berry, would you agree?
Yes, and that's what I was trying to say, is that we wanted to make this a manageable task, and the use of force is our first, and then we can look at some of these other things, because they, you know, they would take some time as well.
Yes.
Well, I think we've covered most of the agenda here.
Yes, I didn't know if there's anything else anybody wanted to say at this time about these 8 items. That's going to be the subject of continuing discussion, of course. So if there's more that anybody would like to say about that now, we can do that, or we can talk about our next meeting.
I'm very interested in 6 and 7. Again, it's probably too big for this committee, but I'm just wondering where I would go with that beyond this committee, if you have any recommendations about accountability. I think that is huge.
Yes, I know you've expressed about point 7 before, as I recall. So, and I think that's
so that even with the hiring practices you're talking about, we cannot hire people who maybe have this type of attitude or a use of force problem that perhaps they didn't put on their application, and then we'd have no way of knowing because there's no standard of accountability across whether the city, county, state, the whole nation, to shuffle people around that we may not want here, no matter how good they might pass the test or something. So yeah.
Related to number 7, and I was gonna share some news articles in the Google Drive, and I haven't had a chance to yet, if anyone's interested. I know some people have been talking about case studies and situations, and we asked Lieutenant about some of those last week. And it just so happened I came across some news articles in the past week of a situation in Beechwood that's going on with a police officer that fired his weapon at a moving car and hasn't worked now for more than a year. And it's at the Ohio BCI is investigating, but so in Beechwood, there's a lot of attention being brought to this, and people on city council are demanding answers of what's happening with this investigation. But one of the things that what I read was that this particular officer had been in trouble before for going 95 miles an hour during a car chase. And, you know, as a part of that, he said, and I can imagine this could be a situation for some police officers, he took it personally that the bad guy was getting away. And, you know, in this situation that happened at Beechwood Mall where he fired his weapon, he said he felt his life was in danger. For him, he thought the car. So, you know, what's going to come out of this case, but having been in this committee meeting last week and listening to the lieutenant talk, I just found it to be really educational, and it helped me when I read these news stories. That kind of made sense why you shouldn't be driving 95 miles an hour, you know, unless it's a violent criminal. Or, why, so somebody stole something from the Beechwood Mall. Does that mean you should be firing your weapon just if the car is going away from you? So I mean, it really gave me a lens to view that through. And I thought, wow, I'm glad that didn't happen here in University Heights. Not that it couldn't happen here. But I just thought that was an important thing in the news that I'll put it in the Google Drive if anybody wants to take a look at it. Maybe you've seen it already.
Sounds good. Thank you. Thank you, Mike.
Mr. Sayers? There's
Yes.
a direct correlation between, if you look at all of the incidents that happen in the United States, there's a direct correlation between who does it and who doesn't do it, and how many times the people who do it continually. It's not a first time. If you go through all of the cases, you will find that the police officer had done it 2, 3, 4, 5 different times while there have been police officers in any number of communities. It's a very small amount, percentage-wise, of policemen who continually do the same kinds of things.
And that's my point.
All right. Is there any further discussion that we want to have this evening on the 8-point policy provisions regarding racial justice? Okay, well then, I'm going to suggest that that we meet again next Wednesday with an eye that we will meet as subcommittees that Mrs. Berry and I will work on assigning on Sunday or Monday of next week after you've all had an opportunity to express your preferences. If for some reason we don't get preferences from you, we will assign you. But if you have preferences, we'll try to follow those preferences. If some sections are more in demand than others, then we will have to make some difficult decisions, and hopefully you'll be understanding and know that even if you don't get your first choice, that it's still a valuable, you're obviously still a valuable part of the process, and that we want you to, and that we will value your input on any of the 6 committees, subcommittees rather. Any closing thoughts or questions, anything anybody would like to bring up?
Mr. Mayor, if I can just bring up one thing before we leave tonight.
Thank you, Lieutenant.
Ms. Sachs, she had a question earlier on in an hour about training or type of training.
Yes.
I just want to explain that since probably the late 90s, ever since the VHS videotape has became popular back then, our department has trained using a scenario-based training format. And we try to take advantage of it as much as we possibly can. It's not an opportunity that comes up very often, but when it does, we do take advantage of that. So our officers, instead of just plunking at a paper target, what we do is we use a scenario-based training to put our officers in a stressful type of situation, and he has to further explain why he used a type of force. And this is both deadly and non-lethal types of force. So it gives the officer, again, in a stressful situation, he has to explain why he chose a certain type of force in a given scenario.
Okay.
Is that by himself or is that in a group?
Well, we could do it one-on-one. We'll either do it one-on-one or you can have an additional officer with you. But for the most part, we have as many of our officers attend those type of trainings. Again, they do not come up very often, but when they do, we do try to take advantage of that.
Do you think they're effective? I mean, what do you think?
Oh, I think that's the type of training that we need to continue doing. You can be, accurate on the firing range using deadly force and put a dozen rounds within a 6-inch circle. But if you can't explain the reason why you're doing it, or they explain the reason why you chose to use a conducted electrical weapon compared to pepper spray, compared to a straight baton, it's a little bit more difficult to have to explain your use or the type of use of force that you do. And ultimately, if it ever leads to litigation where an officer is placed on a stand and he has to explain in a court situation why he chose to use that type of force, it really helps the officer explain his decision making.
Lieutenant,
Yes, sir.
just one quick question. Have we ever thought of putting 2 policemen in a car? I've read a number of articles in regards to that, and it has a tremendous amount of benefits attached to it.
You mean as a 2-man patrol unit?
That's correct.
Well, it would, for a city our size and with our activity level, you have to kind of justify the activity and the type of level that you would have to justify that. Usually your larger cities will have a 2-man patrol unit, but what we like to do is we like to utilize as many patrol vehicles out in the community as we can. We have minimums of 3 officers depending on the time of day, and 4 officers depending on the time of day too.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Very good. All right.
Okay.
Anything else anybody'd like to go over before we adjourn for the evening? All right. Well, once again, thank you all for being here, for taking the time. This is important work, and I feel like we did some good stuff here today. So we will plan to reconvene next Wednesday at 6, where we will break out into subcommittees to be determined.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice seeing you, everybody.
Always.
Be safe.
Yes.
Bye, everyone.
Have a good night.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye, Sheila.
Bye, Paul.
All right.